Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It be the hour of 7 past the noon, and we have a meeting of the Stayton City Council on Monday, the 17th of June, 1 week before the summer solstice, which I know is intriguing to everyone. Also of some small interest that apparently never being part of the fashion police, my choice of summer clothing as subdued tropical camo is not going over very well. So we'll just go with a meeting for that. Would everyone please join me in a flag salute? Go ahead and start. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yes. Proclaim it widely throughout the land. Okay, announcements. Additions to the agenda. Are there any? I don't hear any. Declarations of ex-party contact, conflict of interest, bias, general
Mayor.
Unhappiness. Go ahead, please.
I see on the consent agenda you're going to have the collective bargaining agreement with AFSCME Local 322.
Right.
I am the AFSCME president for Local 896, so I am going to avoid a conflict of interest and abstain from that vote.
Okay. That's all right. Okay. Any others? No? There are no appointments. Citizen comments. Let's go with that. We've got someone here tonight. Ms. Jones, would you like to start?
Sure.
Okay. I have two, but this is one.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. As you know, Mick and Moms has been a business and serving citizens in our community for over 70 years now. Our goal is to continue serving the community by providing jobs to our employees, revenue to our city, and a great down-home atmosphere for our customers. We have been trying for a year now to come up with a solution to smoking and large groups of people standing out in front of the building on the sidewalk. Due to the existing property line and building structure, this has not been an easy task. We are now having our customers smoke in the rear of our building, and most are gladly complying. But in inclement weather, this will not work because there is no cover to keep the wind and the rain off of them. The only cover is in the front of our building. We submitted plans to the city to move our back entrance and install a small awning on the back side of the building that would protrude no farther than the garbage bins that are already there, but we were told we could not. We have asked the city if we could lease one parking space in an underused parking lot at the back side of the building to build a covered smoking area on. RDS has volunteered to provide that covered structure, a bench and a smoking receptacle, but we were told that it would be a liability to the city if we do it. Therefore, I would like to propose another solution. Would the city be willing to sell Mick and Mom's one parking space in that underused parking lot? That would release any liability to the city and to be Mick and Mom's sole responsibility. I believe this to be a fair and reasonable solution.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so that's on the table now.
Mayor,
Steve?
can I ask a question?
Yes, you may
Can I
ask
Sam
a question. Lady, Sam,
Yes. When you were asked about putting an awning on the back of the building, what were the, can you just expand on that a little bit?
Well, what we did was submit a plan. Outside, last time that I came, I showed you pictures of where we had moved our smoking area and the benches right next to a garbage bin. So the awning that we asked to build would be a small awning, and it would come out no further than the garbage can already sticks out, so it wouldn't impede travel down that alleyway any more than the garbage cans already do. And we were willing to forego that cost to put the awning there. And to move our back door, we would have to move it in order to come into Oregon state law 10 feet from any door, smoking prohibited.
Okay.
Yeah.
Other questions? Others? No? Okay. That's got it. Thank you, Sam, for now.
Thank you.
There'll be other things. Steve, did you want to jump in here?
Yes. My name's Steve Poison. I live at 1750 East Pine Street, and I'm president of Revitalize Downtown Stayton. I'll start with Councilor Ort's question. Perhaps I can clarify a little bit. It seemed to me that the Public Works objection to an awning in the alley is that would be a protrusion into a public easement, and that is not allowed, even though it wouldn't, the plan that was talked about wouldn't come out any further than the movable garbage bin that's there, which is about 32 inches or so. So that's why they were told that that would not be an option. I'm here for two reasons. One is to support that there is a solution found for Mick and Moms. I'm not sure what that solution is. I think that's up to the council to decide. But as Samantha stated, Mr. Wu has been working for over a year now to try to find a solution. I've talked along with him to Dan, to Lance, to Michael Schmidt, to as many people at the city as we can about possible solutions for finding a covered smoking area for them that would comply with state law, and there just isn't one. And they are unique in the area because their building covers 100% of their lot. They have no extra room on their lot, period. And since we're trying to not have people smoke in the front of the building, Mr. Wu agrees with that, so has already asked his customers to move to the back. And in the back, there's no room that isn't the alley, except for the parking lot across the alley that the city owns. So pretty much everybody that we've tried to talk with seems stumped as to a solution, but I feel that it's important that the council find a solution that they can offer to Mick and Mom to support this business. Second thing I'd like to ask you for is Ordinance 1019 was suspended, I guess you would call it, earlier this year. There was questions about the public's view on some of the items that were in the ordinance. The mayor appointed a public committee to review the ordinance. They made recommendations to the council, which you have acknowledged or accepted, however it's technically called. I would ask that you review what your committee recommended with what currently exists and make any amendments you feel are called for, but that Ordinance 1019 is once again allowed to stand, that it become in force again, if that's the right term. Any questions?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
just a comment to that, to Mr. Poison's point. I asked Keith about this a couple months ago when it was going to be on the agenda next, and he told me it'll be on the July agenda. Whether that's the first meeting or second meeting, I don't know yet, but we
Okay.
are going to tackle this, be done with it in July.
Great, perfect. See you then.
All right. Thank you. And
Mr.
Sam,
Mayor, can
thank
I-
you for coming down tonight. Yes.
Can I ask a question
Yes,
to
you
Mr.
may.
Poisson?
Anytime.
So with RDS and looking at other similar towns, we can't be the only one with an issue like Mick and Mom's has with the downtown area. Do you know of any, or I'm just trying to think of, what have other places with a similar problem done?
I'm
created
not sure it's an
solutions?
issue about the town. I think it really is an issue about this one particular property. There is no other property in our downtown focus area
Yeah.
that the building covers 100% of the lot. and therefore leaves them no options for a smoking area that is a minimum of 10 feet away from any windows, doors, that kind of thing.
Okay.
I am aware that there have been other towns that have banned smoking in their downtown areas, and what I have seen personally is, I actually was at a town that had little signs on all the signposts in town that said, this is a non-smoking area, there is a public smoking area available to you here. And they came up with some sort of public place that, sort of like many buildings have, that the hospital, for instance, does not allow smoking on their campus, so there's a corner across the street that all of the employees that continue to smoke go across the street every day on their break and smoke. So that's not an official solution. It's actually one that I've been told the hospital administrator isn't fond of, but they do find some other option. I think the best solution I've seen is a town that I was in that provided a labeled space that said this is where the public can smoke. That town's ban was actually stricter than what has been proposed here, in that they did not allow smoking anywhere in the downtown. Our ordinance only bans smoking in front of buildings in the downtown. So that offers usually an option to other buildings to use the back part of their lot or the side of their building or whatever. Mick and Mom's has none of that available to them.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Steve. Is there anything else on that? Well, that's coming up in another month or so, but it's, the stirrings are there, so we'll go with it. Consent agenda tonight is June 3rd City Council meeting and the collective bargaining agreement with AFSCME Local Number 3222. So has everyone had a chance to look through that? And if so, could we get a motion
Mr. Mayor?
on those items, please? Yes.
Considering Mr. Patty's recusal, we might have to break this up, I think. Because Councilor Hook wasn't here at the last meeting to allow her to vote on the minutes. So we probably have to do this two separate consent agenda items.
Can we do both tonight?
Yes, you can. What we can do is pull the union contract from the consent
Yeah.
agenda and just vote on the consent agenda with the minutes,
Right.
and then do a separate.
Yep.
That's what I thought. Great minds think alike. So somebody offer a motion, please.
All right.
On the minutes.
Mr. Mayor, I'll offer a motion to approve letter A of the consent agenda being the June 3rd City Council minutes.
Okay.
Seconded.
I have a motion and a second to approve the first part of the consent agenda to June 3rd City Council minutes. Do I have to, you have to pull, no. All in favor say aye, please.
Aye.
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 Opposed, same sign?
I'm abstaining.
Okay, so 3 to
Passed, that'd be correct.
passed. Passed. Okay. On the second part, the contract.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I'll offer a motion to approve the second portion of the consent agenda, item B, which is the collecting and bargaining agreement with AFSCME Local 3222.
Okay.
I
Got a
second.
motion and a second, thank you, to approve the second part of the consent agenda, a collective bargaining agreement with AFSCME Local 3222. Those don't need discussion, so would you go ahead and poll the council on that, please?
Sure. Counselor Ort?
Yes.
Counselor Hook?
Yes.
Counselor Patty?
Abstain.
Counselor Quigley?
Yes.
Motion passes
Okay, so
3-0 with
3-0.
Counselor
All
Patty
right, good.
abstaining.
Okay, now we'll get into the meat and potatoes a little bit here. A public hearing on ordinance number 1034, adopting the 2019 Transportation System Plan, Comprehensive Plan Amendments, and Associate Land Use Code Amendments. And I need to read a script, which all of you probably all have memorized and I don't. Good evening. My name is Hank Porter, and as mayor, I'll be presiding over this hearing. This is the time and place set for the public hearing in the matter of land use file number 6-04/19 concerning legislative actions adopting an updated transportation system plan, amending portions of the comprehensive plan, and amending portions of the Stayton Municipal Code, Title 17, known as the Stayton Land Use and Development Code. The hearing is now open. The back corner is the agenda for this evening's hearing, which lays out the order in which people will be called on to speak. During the public hearing, a copy of the TSP and proposed amendments, the Planning Commission's rules of procedure for land use public hearings, and a brochure written to facilitate your participation in the public hearing. You are encouraged to obtain and read a copy of these documents as well. At this time, I'd ask the audience if there are any objections to the notice for this hearing. I hear none. To the jurisdiction of this body to hear and consider this case? I hear none. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest, ex parte contact, or bias by any members of this body? I hear none. When it's your turn to speak, please state your name and address for the record. As a participant in the hearing, the city is required to notify you of the final results of the process. We are now ready for the staff introduction. Mr. Fleischman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I will be real brief in my introductory remarks. What you have before you is the culmination of about a year and a half, a little more work by staff and our consulting team and various advisory committees that have been put together to guide the process. Over the course of the process, you had several presentations about our progress, and we have a final draft associated with that. Our text amendments to the comprehensive plan chapter on transportation, and a few code amendments to either implement the plan and or to bring our code into compliance with state rules and requirements. With that, I will turn it over to our consultant team for a more detailed presentation, and then I'll be back to go over the comprehensive plan amendments and the code amendments prior to public testimony. So with that, I'd like to introduce Susan Wright, who you've seen here before. She's a engineer with Kittleson and Associates, and was the primary person responsible for working with us in preparing the TSP.
Great, thank you, Dan. And do you think, could we hit the lights that go over the presentation? Thanks. All right, good evening, Mr. Mayor, and ladies and gentlemen of the council. My name is Susan Wright. I'm a principal engineer with Kittleson and Associates at 851 Southwest 6th Street, Suite 600 in Portland, Oregon. And it has been my pleasure to work over the past year and a half with both Dan and Lance, as well as our advisory committees, one of which included our Citizen Advisory Committee. And I want to thank Councilor Quigley for his participation on that. It was very helpful. Next slide, please. And I'd also like to introduce with me is Brian Gravlin, engineer from my office, who has been working with me on the project since the beginning. So I know I was here before you not too long ago for a joint work session with the Planning Commission and this group. Since then, we've been to the Planning Commission for their hearing recommending adoption. It has been about a year-long process with several points of contact with both a technical advisory committee as well as a citizen advisory committee, and a series of 2 public workshops and a number of work sessions with you and the Planning Commission. Next slide. Since that work session, we had a couple updates based on your input. One was to upgrade the priority of the Ida Street pedestrian improvements, and the other was to add additional details on freight routes and policy within the city. The plan is organized to have an introduction and an overview of goals, objectives, and evaluation criteria that we use to both help develop the plan, as well as it can be used over time to help make decisions. And then after that, the plan is oriented in modal chapters. So there's a pedestrian, bicycle, transit, motor vehicle, other modes, so a chapter for each mode, followed by a funding summary. Each of the modal chapters include some of the existing conditions and facilities, as well as the needs, the kind of overall policy plan, and then projects to implement that plan. I'll step you briefly through each of the modal plans, starting with the pedestrian plan. So the pedestrian plan primarily includes sidewalks and crosswalk improvements. They are sorted by tier, with red being the highest priority, followed by yellow, green, and then blue. The plan includes both sidewalks where none exist, so we call those filling sidewalk gaps, as well as sidewalk reconstructions to widen and improve very kind of substandard or in poor maintenance, aged and poor facilities. Next slide, please. The bicycle plan includes two types of projects. So one is assigning and striping to help identify a street as a suitable bike route without constructing a bicycle lane. Those projects that were primarily added to the plan include designating Ida Street as a suitable east-west route, and 3rd Street all the way from Water, I believe, up to Whitney as a parallel route to Cascade and First as a bike route, a shared bike route with vehicles. Because long-term, the TSP does not include a widening of Cascade to include bike lanes. The solid lines are proposed bike lanes that could occur through a restriping, such as on east of Cascade along Washington and Jefferson, or that might require widening and reconstruction as roads are improved. The motor vehicle plan includes updated roadway cross-sections. One of the key elements of the TSP update was to remove a number of formerly envisioned 5-lane facilities on Golf Club Road, Wilco, and Schaff, to remove those widenings from the TSP, downgrade them to just future 3-lane facilities where 3 lanes don't exist today. It also includes some narrowing of standard cross-sections of lane widths from 12 to 11 or 11 to 10, such as on local streets or neighborhood collectors. And this space will help reduce impervious surface, reduce costs, and create space. Not only you're reducing the amount of impervious surface that you need to treat stormwater runoff, but you're creating space in which you could help treat some of that runoff. And the plan also identifies the use of Green Street treatments, as part of curb extensions to help pedestrian crossings, or potentially utilizing an on-street parking space where you just need space to construct a stormwater facility. This is a freight plan. So the freight plan identifies OR 22, which is designated as a statewide national highway system freight route, and it also identifies the primary routes within Stayton where freight movement needs to be considered in its design and function. The roadway plan also includes a functional classification map, which clarifies each street as to whether it is a major arterial, minor arterial, collector, neighborhood collector, or local street. There's a few changes in the map from the existing TSP, which is primarily in the growth areas. We removed a lot of the future local and collector streets that were just kind of a little bit excessive in the prior plan, a little bit too dense. We're going to need to, as those areas develop, kind of let development identify what is the local street grid, and that will be guided by the collector streets, which we still have identified in the TSP, as well as your kind of street block length and perimeter standards. The main changes to some functional classifications on the east side of town. The future Virginia Street, as well as the future Virginia extension, was upgraded from a local street to a neighborhood collector.
It's your street.
Let me know if you need some help.
Neighborhood collector.
Take a look.
25 miles an hour.
Okay, I talked too long on that slide and fell asleep, so I will go faster.
Ma'am, when would you like to take questions on any of this? Wait till when you're done. It's your option. You tell me.
Yeah, when I'm done, that would be
Okay,
great. Or I'm not sure
that's fine.
how to follow
That works.
the procedural order.
That's fine.
Okay.
That's the procedure.
Okay, next slide, please. So some of those future streets, these are included on the functional classification map, but just to identify them for you kind of more specifically, you can see that the future streets shown in dashed lines, we have some extensions of Pine Street and Virginia as neighborhood collectors. Collectors on the far east end of town and northwest end of town, as well as a few local street infills, which we wanted to make sure were in the TSP in the event that there is infill development in those areas. The roadway plan also includes projects. It includes a few projects on Highway 22, primarily. This is outside of the city and city's jurisdiction, but we did look at these facilities and how they were, primarily from a safety perspective, and how they were serving the city. And we've identified projects on 22 that the city will essentially kind of endorse through your TSP and be able to show support and help advocate for improvements there. Within the city, it includes intersection improvements at a number of locations shown in orange. We'll talk about one of these locations in my subsequent slides, and some just facility upgrades on the series of S-curves on kind of Washington 6th to Jefferson to 10th to Sandy Am and that area. The plan also includes, as the current TSP does, potential future realignment of Golf Lane to tee into the existing signal at Whitney. And we did identify that would be necessary only in the future if area along Golf Lane was annexed into the city and developed. But if that does not occur, just some minor development, which I know is already anticipated on that road, in the near term would not trigger this realignment. But if that whole area were to come in and to be annexed into the city, that improvement would be necessary. So the road, this is just a list of those projects. I'll kind of speak through them. Now let's kind of talk through each of those kind of major intersection improvements one by one. The first being Golf Club Road at Schaff Road. We looked at this intersection quite a bit. The last TSP identified a traffic signal at this location. As we looked at much lower growth rates with this future look than before, we really did identify that although some additional form of treatment is warranted at the intersection, the all-way stop will continue to meet the city's standard for the foreseeable future, but that if growth rates are kind of higher than projected, or if safety starts to become a greater concern at the intersection, we found that a roundabout would be the best alternative, and on par cost-wise with signalizing the intersection and doing the full intersection improvement and kind of realignment of the north leg for sight distance. Next slide. The other location was Wilco and Stayton Road. This is an intersection that had a roundabout identified in the previous TSP. We took a new look at it as a do-nothing situation, see what we could do to convert it to more of a traditional four-way stop, or stay with the planned roundabout, which we did kind of relook at the design. And we did find, the do-nothing option does meet the city's volume to capacity and level of service standards into the future. However, it doesn't really address the need to make the intersection complete with sidewalks and crosswalks and have a gateway into the city. As we looked at just trying to clean it up as a four-way stop and possibly disconnect Jetters Way from the intersection, was going to require an east-west connection from Jetters to Oak. Is that Oak? And so as we cost estimated the two improvements, the roundabout again was actually the cheaper alternative to a complete intersection improvement just as a four-way stop when you considered the roadway extension in particular between Jetters and Oak. So we did leave the roundabout in the TSP. I've got a little comparison because of the comments that were received at the Planning Commission. I just wanted to kind of demonstrate how the footprint of the roundabout did change. In this iteration of the TSP, the roundabout center has been pulled a little bit to the west, which does have a slightly larger impact on the vacant property on the west side. But that was really for the purposes of helping us reduce the impacts on the fire station property. Can I step away from the mic? Are you recording?
We are recording.
Okay, well, I'll try to stop that. You may notice in this, the older TSP, the splitter island for the roundabout blocked a portion of the fire station's entrance to their far west bay. And when you add sidewalks here, we were going to have a pretty significant impact on their parking area. So the updated plan intentionally, the splitter island does not have any impact on any of the parking bays for the fire station, allowing them to make full in and outs in any direction from any of their bays. It also reduces the impacts on their parking lot. And it has pretty comparable impacts on the other properties, but slightly larger impact on the vacant parcel. This design also shows some of the sidewalks surrounding the roundabout, so it looks like it has a slightly larger footprint, but this one just didn't get to the level of detail of showing the sidewalks. So if you envision some of the sidewalks on this, you can see a slightly different view of the impacts. We really have no change in the alternatives as far as the potential for access for that vacant property to have access to Wilco. In either scenario, the current access that is there to the property immediately to the north is already below the city's 150-foot access spacing standards for that facility. And you can see that the new design actually helps open up that access to full access, and maybe there's potential for a shared access there in the future. Next slide, please. This shows the improvement this is the Washington to 6th to Jefferson S-curves. We looked at a couple different opportunities to how do we improve flow from this whole double series of S-curves where we're making some of the unsafe intersections more clear, but not forcing people to stop at all four intersections. And the preferred option at this series of curves was to formalize the S-curve from Washington to 6th and actually remove the east leg of that intersection, allowing that to just be a square block there, and convert Jefferson and 6th to an all-way stop. Next slide, please. And then as you continue down that corridor and you look at, this is Jefferson to 10th to Santiam, we really couldn't disconnect the east leg at this S-curve, but we showed some improvements to more formalize it where it's clear that the east leg of the intersection is the one teeing in and needs to be yielding to the other movements. And we looked at a variety of treatments for 10th and Sandy Am. This intersection really does warrant some improvements in the future, and the alternatives analysis did show that a small roundabout is being the most efficient improvement. So the TSP financial funding plan really does provide an estimate of the full cost of everything in the plan, and that would be to do all the intersection improvements, fill all the sidewalk gaps and bike lane gaps, improve all of the facilities. And this is a normal exercise that all transportation plans do go through. It results in a total plan of about $71 million. But we developed the cost-constrained plan, which is a requirement of the state for planning. The cost-constrained plan is estimated at $14 million, and that's where we had to identify what are the highest priority projects. Throughout the TSP, we have projects identified as high, medium, and low. And that was really more of it's not like a time frame where high priority is happening in the next 5 years. It was these are the projects with the highest priority to be considered for limited funding, and those high priority projects would be envisioned to occur over the next 20 years. Being in this cost-constrained plan allows the city to consider the improvements for the SDCs, but does not necessarily mean that all of those projects will make it into the SDCs. That $14 million of projects, each project has a varying SDC eligible component, so really only a portion of that $14 million will translate into the SDC cost basis. With that, I'm going to talk a little bit about the implementing ordinances that are in your packet to implement the TSP. The implementing ordinances include updates to the transportation chapter of the comprehensive plan, really primarily to bring the comprehensive plan chapter on transportation up to date with this updated TSP and be consistent with the statewide transportation planning rule, as well as consistent with some of the other adopted plans that we considered as part of this process that fed into the TSP. Specifically, the comprehensive plan amendments to the Chapter 4, as I mentioned, they update the goals that are coming out of the TSP, updating the policies to be consistent with that, as well as updating the general background section about transportation. Includes new policy statements that are consistent with the TSP goals. And then on the regulatory amendment side, it includes proposed amendments to the development code to basically say that whenever there are code amendments, those code amendments need to be demonstrated to be consistent with the TSP, that any improvements you condition on development need to be roughly proportional with their impacts, identifies kind of requirements for bicycle and pedestrian connections when there are partitions and subdivisions, as well as identifying some site consideration for access to the sidewalk on transit streets. That's what the access to transit is all about. Next slide. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to skip that one. Can you go back? Okay. In addition to that, the development code updates include some new opportunities for reducing off-street parking requirements in certain conditions, update the roadway classifications consistent with the TSP, as well as some of the design standards that we updated in the TSP. And really tried to make kind of improve and strengthen the city's development code to just ensure consistency between the land use and development code, the public works design standard, as well as the TSP, and make sure that the development code was implementing the multimodal objectives that are coming out of the TSP, as well as that were already within your comprehensive plan. And with that, I am open to your comments and addressing any questions you have.
Let's see, is that questions from the council? Yeah, questions from the council. Who wants to start? Somebody go ahead and get those lights, I guess. I can start. I really like the idea of reconfiguring that 10th Street and, what is that, Old Mahama Highway, that Sandy M, thank you. I see sight hazards all the time when I go up there. No one else seems to. Right there on Sandy M, where it comes around that corner to the east. To me, there's always sight hazards, so I like that one. Why do people get so upset about roundabouts? Not everyone has been trapped in a Paris taxi on the inside lanes at an intersection and not be able to get out.
Well, I don't know what, I really couldn't speak to what it is that people don't like about them. Generally, we find that once they've been implemented, people tend to find that they like them, even if they were concerned about them. I mean, the main concerns really have to do with making sure that everybody's going to understand how to yield and operate within them. There's also a lot of concerns about heavy vehicles and freight and whether they're going to be able to maneuver, which are all things that we've considered and looked at in the designs and run the truck templates. But the industry in general has found that roundabouts are safer than traffic signals. So if you come to the point where you need some traffic control at an intersection, in most situations, a roundabout is safer, sometimes than an all-way stop in a rural area. Definitely safer than a traffic signal in most situations, just because it really eliminates rear-end crashes, or reduces rear-end crashes, side swipe crashes, failure to yield crashes, and when you do have crashes, instead of one person going straight and one person sitting there, you've got a huge differential of speed most frequently, and the most severe injury crashes usually are a result of large differential in speed between the two vehicles involved in the crash. And at roundabouts, you really have two vehicles, if there is an issue, are generally traveling at about the same speed, which is generally under 20 miles an hour, which is greatly reducing the severity of the crash.
Do traffic engineers have an idea about how much blood is in a roundabout before people get conditioned to use it? Do they guess at how many bodies you have to sort out? 2 or 3 or 4 years ago, the city of Sisters put a roundabout on the west side of town. And it was the talk of that place for months as people fought over it and argued about it. And it was maybe the biggest thing to happen in Sisters since the last cowboy ran through. I don't know, but it was controversial. It really was.
Yeah, and that is a state highway. And so ODOT has embraced roundabouts even on state highways just due to their ability to handle variable traffic flows. So they're very good at handling the kinds of traffic, high traffic, low traffic. You're not really hindering anybody by installing a signal if the traffic is low. You can kind of go through it usually. They operate fine. And high traffic, I was through there recently, and yes, traffic from the other end of town, the far end of town that had a signal, that traffic was all the way through town and spilling into the roundabout. But if they get rid of that other traffic signal at the far end of town, I think that will be cleared up. But ODOT Region 4 is implementing roundabouts at, I think, at least 4 different locations.
Last comment on this, from the input that you've got, if there's any citizen input yet, those 2 roundabouts are the most controversial part of this, aren't they?
And I don't think we've had any formal comments concerned about the roundabout as a treatment. You obviously saw the comment in your packet with the concerns of the property impacts on the northwest corner. But the concept of having a roundabout in Stayton, I did not, I don't think we have any comments on the record with general concerns of roundabouts as a concept.
Well, I get it at least, not being a technician at all or anything, but just that concept is widely discussed. Anyone that sees this. I'm done. Thank you. Go ahead, folks.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Dan, in the TSB from 2004, was there any SCCs collected towards that? For example, the roundabout that we looked at that was in front of the firehouse?
Since 2006, the city has been collecting transportation SDCs based on the estimated cost of a number of projects, such as the roundabout at Wilco in West Washington, expanding Wilco Road to 5 lanes, expanding Golf Club Road to 5 lanes. The 2004 TSP called for 2 pairs of roundabouts at the S-curves. So all of those projects had a cost estimate prepared at that time and had an estimate of how much of the project was warranted to accommodate new growth, and those percentages were worked into the TSDC calculations for the past close to 15 years.
Sure. And what's the expectation of a developer paying those SDCs as far as actually seeing something come to fruition?
I don't think that developers pay their transportation SDCs with the expectation that they are contributing to a project.
Okay.
And that project needs to be built.
Okay.
The transportation SDCs are based on the aggregate of the transportation improvements in the city that need to be considered due to growth, and the city has been spending that money to improve and expand our transportation system. We installed the traffic signal at Whitney and Cascade Highway. We have contributed to reimbursements to developers who have built portions of our collector street system, et cetera.
Okay. So the current projects that were identified in the new TSP that we're talking about today, is that going to increase the transportation SDCs?
That I do not know yet.
Okay.
On one hand, we are decreasing the number of projects to be financed. On the other hand, because we have a lower projection of growth, we will have fewer new trips assumed to be happening over time. And so while we'll have a lower cost in the numerator of the equation, we will also have a smaller number in the denominator of the equation, and we haven't yet started to build that equation.
Right.
That's the next step after the council adopts the TSP. So I really, all I can tell you, it is likely that our transportation SDC will change. But whether it will be a smaller number or a bigger number, I have no idea, because we haven't started that process yet.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Other questions? Go ahead.
A follow-up question. So with that, you're saying, am I understanding, we won't know how much it's going to cost us to change our TSP until after we accept it?
No, the TSP has...
I'm sorry, we won't know how much our SDC
we won't know what
charges
our...
go,
Right.
or how it's going to
Correct.
affect them.
If we have to just add this to that.
That makes me a little nervous.
Go
Is
ahead.
that standard? Sorry. Sorry,
Go
Mr.
ahead.
Mayor. Is that standard for us to do?
I believe so,
Okay.
because we could, if the council would like, we can come back with an estimate prior to adoption, but we won't know what projects to include in that formula until we know that you're ready to adopt the draft TSP with the list of projects and the cost estimates that are in it.
Okay.
Could I help answer that question
Yes,
as well?
please.
But I would say yes, that is a very common process. You update the TSP, and then you update the SDCs. And SDCs frequently get updated more frequently than your TSP at times as projects get built or things need to get added in that you might have made a minor amendment to your TSP, and then you need to update the TSP, the SDCs to reflect that. There's also a lot of discretion of the council as far as what projects go into the SDC formula and at what level you have the SDC from a policy standpoint, set to decide how much you want SDCs to fund those projects. We as a consultant could tell you how much of those projects you are legally allowed to fund based on growth, and then it is up to you as the council to decide, do you want to fund them at that maximum amount you can legally, or do you want to fund them at something less than that? That is a city council decision.
I'm supposed to know this, and I can't keep the right number in my head, but our growth rate is what, 0.75% a year?
Mm-hmm.
It's not what we thought it was going to be. Is it going to be higher than we think it is, or that we know it is now? Dan, can you help me with that?
Generally, about 0.75% per year is a close estimate of the current growth rate and the projected growth rate over the next 20-year period.
Okay, so
at the time the 2004 TSP was written, it was written assuming that we were going to see something like 2.5% to 3% growth a year, and hence there was the projected need for a number of transportation system improvements that we are now saying that are not likely to be needed in the next 20-year period, even though we're now 15 years past when they were saying they were going to be needed.
in your research and knowledge, did we ever assume that 2.5% to 3% in the last 15 years?
It was the growth rate that was assumed at that time when the transportation system plan was drafted, when the wastewater system plan was drafted, when the water system plan was drafted. They all used different but similar growth rates. Those that were written by the same consultant did use the same growth rate, but the TSP and the water and the sewer master plans used different growth rates. The parks master plan used a different growth rate. Under today's law, Portland State University's Population Research Center is charged by the legislature with developing growth projections for each city in the state, and our plans need to use that growth rate.
And that's about 0.75%.
And that,
okay.
yes, that
Okay.
rounded to the nearest quarter, that's probably an accurate
All right.
description.
Super. Thank you. Other questions, please, go ahead.
So clearly we want to attract developers still and not charge too high, but improving streets is one of our main goals, which this plan sets out to do. So my question, I guess, I have a couple of them, is typically does a council get to have the combined power of approving increases to SDCs? Like, can we hold off on projects that in lieu of increasing an SDC charge too high or an increase in SDC charges? I don't know if that's a question for you or her or both.
Either one, probably.
Yeah.
As Susie said a little while ago, based on the project list in the TSP, they will come back to us with what an estimate of the percentage of that cost that is necessary due to growth and how much of it is to address existing deficiencies. In our current transportation SDC schedule, there are some projects that are 100% growth, there are some that are 0% growth, and there are some that are numbers in between. So once you go through that exercise, that gives the council the maximum legal transportation SDC that the city could charge. And as was said earlier, it's then a policy decision either to remove projects and say that's not likely to happen we shouldn't be collecting SDCs, and that's what this city did in 2013-14, when it had been 7-8 years, and we were saying, gee, we're not going to see the growth that they thought we were going to have when they wrote the plan, and we removed some projects from the transportation SDC and lowered the transportation, and we, at the same time, we updated the cost estimates for inflation, which had not been done for 7 or 8 years, but the net result was a lower transportation SDC. So you will have that ability when we present that to you to say, oh, gee, that number's too high, but you can't go any higher than that. You can't raise the rate above what we come up with, but you can lower it as a matter of policy.
Follow-up question, Mr. Mayor?
Certainly.
And is that something that we need to do that now? Do we adopt this with or approve it, whatever the right term is? Do we approve it with that stipulation that we want to start like lower, or that we want to temporarily hold off on certain projects and not collect the SDCs for those projects? When do we do that?
You would do that when you can. We will be back to you with a resolution. The SDCs are set by the council by resolution, and we will be back to you with a draft resolution with a transportation SDC methodology and the transportation SDC schedule incorporated into it. And that would be the time to have that discussion.
Mr. Mayor, one last follow-up. And you were talking about growth projects versus ones that were deficiencies. Are we able to also prioritize deficiencies over growth ones if we don't? I want to make sure that it's clear. Like if we have really terrible roads, are we able to prioritize those as a council over like a growth, like a roundabout going in the next 10 years? Like, how does that happen?
You are able to, that happens in your annual budgeting process and your capital improvements budget, which is adopted as part of the budget.
Perfect.
You may not legally use SDCs to fix existing problems. The law limits the city's ability to use SDCs only for projects that are needed because of projected growth. So if our streets are in lousy condition today because they were never built right or because we failed to take care of them, we may not use SDC money to fix them unless we are also expanding their capacity. But if we've got a 2-lane road today that with no paving and we need to fix it, and we're going to end up with a 2-lane road tomorrow, we may not use SDC funds to pay for those improvements.
The roundabouts are like,
the roundabouts
that kind of gets around
are needed
that,
for growth.
And it also gets the
new
sidewalks.
Collector roads, the S-curves, new sidewalks where there are no sidewalks today, etc.
Thank you so much.
But fixing East Virginia Street east of 7th Avenue cannot use SDCs.
Okay.
To pick on somebody's street.
All right. Have we got most of the questions for now?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Okay. One of our community members has a concern about the roundabout proposed at Wilco Road, Washington Street, and Stayton Road, and its necessity. Can you talk about that and why we need some
Do you want to go
sort
back
of
to that slide, Brian?
If anyone was listening, the mayor examined that question somewhat earlier.
Okay.
But
I mean, even if you
that's
just
fine.
want to
No,
speak
go ahead.
specifically to it.
Yes, so the improvement of this location was in the current TSP, and it was in the current TSP because the previous TSP was forecasting a lot of growth. We did look at a do-nothing scenario for this intersection and did find that the 5-way stop, or it's really a 4-way stop with a kind of a two-way stop right next to it. I'm at the right
Wilco,
location?
Washington,
Yes,
and
you are.
Stayton. This is
Okay.
the right one. Actually, they're both. They're questioning both of them, so. Sorry, carry on.
So the other, I'll just speak to the other one real briefly. The other one, the north end, that Schaff and Wilco, that one does have a larger traffic growth component, kind of really triggering the need for improvements at that location. At this location, it's really not so much of a traffic increase issue as just the need to improve the intersection in general is not up to urban design standards. It lacks sidewalks, bike lanes, appropriate places to cross the street. It has too closely spaced intersections that do cause some operational issues as folks from Jetters block the intersection sometimes as they go across to turn left. So if you're strictly applying the city's traffic operations standard at this intersection, you could say we don't need to do anything. But when you look at all the other components and goals of a transportation system, of accommodating safe crossings and pedestrians and bicycles and a clear, understandable traffic control, those are the kind of the main triggers that are, I think, still warranting an improvement at this intersection, even if the traffic growth is really not warranting the change in and of itself. It was also discussed as a gateway to the city, which is really also I think contributing to the necessity of not just having something pretty, but having something that allows you to understand that you're transitioning from a rural to a suburban area and have some clarity as to what to do when you get there.
We're done with that one?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, I have another question.
At the point of beating a dead horse to death, is it, I actually like this round, a lot of the roundabout thing would help our heavy truck traffic. And I don't know how many of those guys don't like them. But is it possible to pick one and not the other? You have to buy the whole, this way, control traffic on the west side of town is with these?
You don't have to do both of them. I guess both locations.
They probably both warrant it, but...
So this location, we did look at improving it. If you want to improve the intersection, you can leave it as is. You could leave it as is for the foreseeable future. If you want to improve it, to have fully upgraded streets on all approaches. If you want to improve it, we looked at two options for that. One, a four-way stop, where it's more of a traditional four-way stop, a little bit tighter intersection, really requires cutting off Jetters Way and building a east-west connector to help those folks get to Oak, would impact the fuel station. So if you want to improve it, we looked at that option and we looked at this option, the roundabout option. They have very similar price. So you can choose to not improve it, or if you choose to have it improved, our process really told us that this is the better option for improving it over other options for improving it.
Okay, and that's why we asked you to do that, but there is that do-nothing option.
There is.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, go
Can I
ahead.
ask a clarification question? So for this specific roundabout, is it that it is just more safe to put it in there, like as opposed to a traffic light, and it allows for ADA accessible sidewalks that are making it so that our residents can use that connection or that road to get places? And then on top of that, is it also that it brings this attractive piece into the city all in one? Even if it's not needed, the safety portion of it alone seems like it would be worth it.
Yeah.
But that is why you guys put it in there, is for the safety, for the ADA access, putting sidewalks in, because there are none right now.
Yes.
Okay. I just want to be sure that is the purpose for that exact one.
You folks ready to go to public testimony on this?
I just have one more question,
Okay.
Mr. Mayor. So the totals that you have for the improvements, is that your anticipated amount for like the whole project, or because some of those are county roads as well, and so is this what you're foreseeing is going to be the total for the whole projects or our portion of a project?
Total costs, including engineering and design and contingencies, although they do not include right-of-way, because for many of them, that right-of-way will be obtained as development occurs or might already be there. There may be some areas where the city would need to obtain right-of-way. But so it is, the full cost does not consider any cost sharing. But I don't think the county, I mean, staff wanted to talk a little bit about county's contributions to county facilities.
We met with Marion County and their their new public works director, and he has said that they have very little, if any, monies to contribute if we were to go forward. So I believe the way she has it calculated is probably the most accurate way for going forward.
Thank you.
Are we done with questions? Not quite. Mr. Petty, go ahead.
Hello, Susan. First of all, I just wanted to say this was great. I mean, it shows. A year and a half, Dan said, the work shows. So thank you for that. I want to say that, first of all.
Thank you.
I did have some questions about Project M4, the 6th Avenue Always Stop Control. In the explanation there in the TSP, it says citizens commented that the two intersections that make up this S-curve need pedestrian improvements as they are currently difficult to navigate on foot. I guess my question is, why a stop and why not some sort of signaling device for just crossing? I was a little confused by that.
Sorry, let me catch up to
Yeah.
my table for
And it's on page 55 of the document.
Okay.
It's going to be useful.
And did that translate into a project on table 8? Let's see. Oh, yes. Yes, okay. So, sorry, I'm oriented now. Could
That's
you repeat
fine.
the question?
Yeah, so figure 13, page 55 is where the actual description is.
Yeah.
And my question specifically is, it states that citizens commented that the two intersections that make up this S-curve need pedestrian improvements as they are currently difficult to navigate on foot. I guess my question is, why an all four-way stop and not some sort of pedestrian, signaling device or a crosswalk of some kind?
Well, you need clear lines of sight to kind of have a pedestrian safely cross. To create crosswalks, you need 4 depending on what the crossing movement is, depending where you're trying to cross. We really wouldn't, I suppose you really couldn't just create a crosswalk at one location at the intersection very safely. You could look at potentially installing a crosswalk mid-block somewhere upstream or downstream of that. But really, to create good visibility and safety for a pedestrian, you need 4 crosswalks at this location, and really formalize it as an intersection rather than so somebody coming down Sandy Am knows, I'm sorry, that's Jefferson, coming west on Jefferson knows that they need to yield and look for pedestrians rather than today feeling that they are a free-flowing movement. The way the intersection is configured today, that as you're going around the curve, the car feels that they have a right-of-way, even though even unmarked at those locations, they should yield to pedestrians. But without making that intersection feel like a traditional 4-way intersection, it would be very challenging for a pedestrian to feel safe crossing at the 2 legs across the free-flowing movement. So there really would not be a free-flowing movement under this configuration.
Right. So as far as that goes, what were the comments that you received that motivated this project? I mean, was it just the pedestrian lack of ability to cross there at that particular intersection? Just so I'm understanding this correctly.
It was general safety and for really all modes, even drivers who might want to go straight through that intersection or turn. It's been an issue that it was identified in the current TSP, actually had a little series of mini roundabouts at all 4 of these intersections. And so we were trying to look at it as more specifically as a corridor. How do we create more clear rights-of-way for both drivers, as well as good, clear expectancy for pedestrians and drivers at dealing with each other at all 4 intersections, but without having to completely stop drivers at all 4 locations or put them through 4 roundabouts. And we really felt that this kind of series of 4 intersection improvements really kind of looked at each intersection individually and really tried to balance what was going to make the most sense for drivers at each of the locations. I think that location at Jefferson and 6th, just because of the traffic flows on 6th and north of here, that intersection the traffic lends itself to operate more of like a traditional 4-way intersection. Whereas the intersection on the south, we said, hey, we can simplify this even further. And kind of maintain that continuous flow for traffic.
Right.
So we tried to find a balance going through the entire corridor.
Yeah, I see that you've done that, and thank you for explaining all that. And my final question, at the risk of sounding completely ridiculous, were there any alternatives explored to your preferred alternative for the S-curves there, as it's titled?
Yes, we actually looked at, hey, could we disconnect any legs at that north intersection as well? So could disconnect the through opportunity at Jefferson at that location. We looked at, of course, a mini roundabout. And I guess one thing we didn't explore, but you could still explore if you did the improvements here to at least square up the intersection, a 2-way stop. But just given the nature of the traffic flows there, we primarily looked at an all-way stop.
Okay. Sorry, I said last question. What would a 2-way stop look like? Can you explain that a little bit?
That would be just where you stop the east-west movements or the north-south movements. But I think given how much traffic is coming from 2 sides, it really lends itself to all-way stop.
A lot of those options were discussed within the committee.
Okay. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
No, you're welcome.
Living in that neighborhood, a certain amount of the traffic comes down, what's the east-west street? That's Jefferson, isn't
The lower one is Washington and the upper one is Jefferson.
it? Jefferson. Coming west on Jefferson, and people scoot through that intersection down to 3rd. Go clear down to 3rd and turn north or south. Schools are there.
Yep.
It's, left is downtown. So I would suggest that's where most of the traffic is. The ones that don't know, they come up Washington and slide around the corner and slide around the other corner and head east or west. But yeah, there's a lot of traffic. Just zip right through there. If that helps, it probably doesn't.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that's exactly the reason that we ended up with the 4-way stop recommendation.
Are we, I've added way too many of my comments tonight, and apologies for that. And, are we ready to go to
Yes.
public testimony on
Yes.
this? Okay, let's do that.
Thank you.
And thank you for now, Susan. Public testimony. Who wants to say something? George, you're sitting there needing to share with us tonight. Not to pick on you, but I did.
I'm George Gershbacher. I live at 7495 Anderson Road in Almsville. I was in real estate here for 40-some years and still dabble in it with another gal in my office. But a couple of things that come to my mind, and one of them, you were just alluding to it, Mayor, from 10th down to 6th Street, there's a lot of traffic there, and I had the privilege, and I encourage people to do this, sign up for a ride with the police department. I've done it with Stayton, Marion County, and also the state police, and I'll tell you, it opens your eyes to a lot of stuff. The one when I did here in Stayton, that particular part of town from 10th down to 6th is the speed traffic in there, and the chief told me this a couple years ago that's something that they really watch because of just it's a freeway in there. So I don't know how much this stuff will have an impact there, but that is something that he mentioned. But I'm more interested kind of in the two roundabouts out on Shaft Road and Wilco, and then to Washington and Wilco. It hasn't happened, but I had the industrial land there for sale for 6 or 8 years and had no interest in it for a couple of reasons, just because of the major industrial part in Salem was being filled up. But I think that could happen, and this would be great, I think, for the city. But if and I don't know if Dan has any information there. I know there's a little bit of a development proposed out there, and it'll probably go through. But if a major development came into Stayton, it would certainly help. But it also would impact immediately the traffic on Golf Club. And so I don't know how long it would be to take and put one of these projects into place if that would happen. I mean, I don't know, Dan may have more insight in that as far as if there's any major development coming in, but that's something to consider. And then the other thing is, I was wondering how truck traffic deals with the roundabouts, because at Salem, out here, everything goes through Wilco and then down Wilco and then down Washington to get over into Lynn County and Sile. So that's just something that I have some thoughts about. I don't know about any towns that have roundabouts and how truck traffic can get through them. So that's just a couple comments that I have. Okay. Dan, I don't know, maybe you know of any major development, because it would create an immediate impact on those two intersections.
Okay, thank you, George. Other thoughts or comments from the public at this point? Okay, questions from the council? Any more? Dan, a staff summary, please.
Certainly. You've got before you Ordinance 1034 that lays out a number of findings that talk about our process of how we involve the public, how we are complying with the state's transportation planning rule, how the TSP complies with and relates to the Oregon Highway Plan, about statewide planning goal 12, and again, and the Oregon Transportation Plan, etc. Susie described to you the changes in the Chapter 4 of the Comprehensive Plan that are included in the package, and provided a summary of the changes to Title 17. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on May 28th. There was only one person who testified at that, and that individual has provided you with their written comments that we have kind of discussed a little bit in your questions. Following their public hearing, the Planning Commission recommended that the TSP be adopted, that the the comprehensive plan amendments be adopted and that the code amendments be enacted, and that is also the recommendation from staff.
Okay, thank you.
My staff report provides you with a number of options available to you this evening, which would be to continue the hearing for another evening, or to close the hearing and approve the first consideration of the ordinance as drafted, or close the hearing, approve the first consideration of the ordinance with some modifications should you wish, or close the hearing and continue your deliberations at your next meeting.
Okay. Thank you, thank you. So we are at that point. What would you folks like to do? I can close the hearing, or if we keep it, we can, as Dan just said, we can continue it, close it, and go to a first consideration, close the hearing and approve the ordinance with modifications, or close the hearing and continue deliberations until July 1st. If you folks want the hearing to continue, I'm not going to close it.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I would like to move that we close the hearing and approve the first consideration of ordinance 1034.
Okay.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to close the hearing and approve the first consideration of ordinance 1034. Is there any other discussion, please?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. So I know that some of these questions that we asked may have seemed unnecessary or redundant, but I felt that it was important for us to get that clarification of what these projects are and why they're going to help us, and make sure that we all understood, us and the residents understood why we're spending money or planning to spend money on all of these projects, because we're entrusted with, we and the city are entrusted with spending money wisely and managing it. So to have that clarification, I feel, was super important.
Okay. That's good. Thank you. Other thoughts or considerations?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I'll just summarize it by saying it's a plan, and it has projections in it, and it's not set in stone. So the same questions that Councilor Hook asked about how we pick and choose which project takes place, and it's all based on the population growth. So I'm good with the way we have it set up today.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
Other thought? Yes.
So even with the, is it still possible if we did the first consideration today, would that give you, Dan, enough time to do any estimates on what those SDC charges might, those changes might look like? I'm just kind of interested to see if anybody else is interested in that at all. Only because we can pick and choose the...
Well, if the council approves the first consideration unanimously,
okay,
then under our charter, the ordinance is considered enacted and sent to the mayor for his action.
Yes.
So if you want to see an estimate of the impacts on the transportation SDCs, then I would recommend, before you act on this, I would recommend that you table any action on it until you get there, until you get that information.
We've got a motion on the floor, so we've got to deal
I
with
thought
that.
that it's my understanding that even if we don't have these impacts to the SDCs, we still have, the city and the council have control over what's spent, how much we're going to raise the SDCs. So even if we don't have that information in front of us now, we still have power afterwards, like to control that. So we'll still get to see it, we'll see it afterwards, and then we can start making a plan. And then I think Dan said something about a resolution coming forward on these things. So I don't think this is like a nail in the coffin by any means for anything.
So we're not like Councilor Cluey said, this is just a plan, and so if we go back and we say, okay, this is going to cost too much money, or we need to wait on this, then we can pick and choose and decide based on what it looks like. Yeah. But this is the idea where we want to go.
Yeah, Dan
had said that it doesn't have to be what we do, correct?
Well, if you want to chew on this some more, the way to
I
fix
just
it...
want to, I just want to make sure that we're clear, that we're,
No, that's fine, now listen.
Adopting the TSP as put in front of you essentially establishes a theoretical ceiling above which the SDCs cannot exceed,
Okay.
based on the constrained cost estimates that are included in here. We will then take those projects, work with Kittleson to assign a percentage for growth of each of those projects.
Correct.
What the projected increase, and that establishes, as I alluded to before, that establishes the numerator in the equation of what's it going to cost to improve our system. We then take what's the projected number of trips that we expect to have in 20 years compared to what we have now. That creates the denominator, and then we do the math to come up with a per trip cost. And that's what the maximum SDC could be. And if you go, wowzers, that's a lot of money, then by policy you can say, let's only collect a quarter of that.
okay. I'm good with that.
Frank's ready to go ahead?
Mr. Mayor, call for the question, please.
Okay, question's been called for. Alyssa, would you poll the council on ordinance 1034
Yes.
as presented?
Counselor Quigley?
Aye.
Counselor Ort?
Yes.
Counselor Patty?
Yes.
Counselor Hook?
Yes.
Motion passed 4-0.
Motion passes. Okay, and so I've got a little comment to read at the end of that, and...
You want to close the hearing?
Oh, let's close the hearing then, too. Yeah. So, first consideration and the approval, and it is enacted and will be presented to His Honor for signature. Closing statement. The City Council's decision may be appealed to the Land Use Board of Appeals within 21 days in accordance with the Oregon Revised Statute 197.830. Our thanks to the folks from Kittleson this evening, and let's thrash on through some more stuff here. General business, resolution number 993, adopting fees and charges various city services for the 2019-20 fiscal year. Alyssa.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and Council. Before you, you have the proposed Resolution 993, adopting fees and charges for the upcoming fiscal year. This year, we took a little closer look. What happens is, just to explain the process to you, is I send this out to all the department heads and ask them to review their fees, and if they see anything that needs to be changed, adjusted, we make those adjustments. And one of the large items that you'll see changed this year was the addition of public records to the resolution. We didn't really have a mechanism within the fee schedule to allow for charging for staff time officially, or as you'll see in my report, I found in looking that we hadn't increased the fees for police reports since about 1988. I thought I'm just gonna look back and see when the last time we raised this fee, and it was established in 1988 from what I could tell, and $10 just for the amount of work and the hands that it's going through just wasn't really covering the staff time. And so we looked at some other, I looked at the city of Salem and kind of bounced off of what they're doing, and we thought incorporating for police reports specifically, incorporating staff time into that would allow us, it's covering myself, the records clerk, and the lieutenant who does the review, and making sure that we're covering a little bit more of those costs at the staff level and the time that it takes. So beyond that, if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, go ahead.
I only have one question about this, and that's basically, is this pretty consistent with other municipalities that are about the same size, same kind of?
It definitely varies, but for the most part, yes. I would say we kind of look around at what other entities are charging, and we also try to look at what our actual costs are, and I think some of them even, I think, went down for some of them.
I did see some.
To make sure that we're not overcharging, and I think we lowered our copies per page. I think we did. Just trying to make sure, the costs of copies didn't it's not quite so expensive to make a color copy these days as it was 10 years ago, so.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
That's great.
Mr.
Other
Mayor.
thoughts on this? Yes, Brian?
I do have a question. In regards to the appeal of exclusion notice, can you elaborate on that, Alyssa, please, and tell us what that entails? So if I get a notice, I'm not excluded from property, and I want to come appeal that, I have to pay $50 to appeal that? Am I reading that right?
You are. I'm not going to be the one that's going to be able to answer that for you. That was something that the chief said.
Okay. And what does our charter say as far as, doesn't the city manager have an involvement as far as making those types of decisions, or I can't remember, or even the court, even what the judge? Just curious.
Yeah, that would be something I'd need to look into for you.
I could see that being pretty tough on some people that are outside.
Citizen comments on this, anything? Council deliberation? Council action?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I agree with Councilor Quigley with the appeal for exclusion, is that what it's called?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, if that's not something that it looks like that was just completely added in, right? Yeah, it's a new thing.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so I don't know, I just feel like it can put a hardship on people that are already going through stuff.
Probably a good thing to update these every 30 years or so. Seems like a good one. Little thing called inflation. What would you folks like to do with this? After looking at it. It's got some options and a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we adopt resolution number 993, but strike the exclusion appeal charge.
Okay.
Second.
Got a motion to adopt resolution 993, but redact, strike the, what's it called again? I'm sorry.
Appeal of exclusion notice.
Appeal exclusion notice part of it, okay? What page is that on, just so we...
It's on page 2 of 4, 2 of 11, sorry. 11? Under police.
11.
Under page 2 of 11, Mr.
Under
Mayor.
page 2 of 11.
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's just go with that. I'll find it later. Page 2 of 11, thank you. Let's see, let's go to a decision on this one. We got a motion?
And a second.
And a second, so let's go. Would you poll the council on this one too,
Yes.
please?
Discussion.
Unless there's discussion. Is there some? Okay. Keep it going.
Councilor
Keep it
Hook?
tight. Okay.
Yes.
Councilor Ort? Yes. Councilor Quigley?
Yes.
Councilor Patty?
Yes.
Motion
Okay,
passed
so,
4-0.
Okay, we've got that one, good. Thank you. Okay, Alyssa, executive recruitment agencies request for proposals.
Yes, let me shuffle my papers here real quick. Okay. Hello again.
Start with March.
So I've, as you know, Mayor and Council, back in March 2019, our city manager notified the council that he would not be seeking renewal of his contract later this year. So I began the process of looking into what other cities do when they're going through this kind of process, and I reached out to, as you see in here, several different agencies, 14 agencies, to request that they give us proposals for recruitment of a new city manager, and I received 7 proposals back in April. I began review once we got through the budget process. I began sitting down and reviewing the proposals that we received. I considered several questions, which I was thankful that I had networked and reached out. I was able to get an idea of what are we looking for in this. And so there, within the staff report, it talks about several questions that I considered in doing my review. And based on that review, I was able to narrow down the list to 3 different agencies. And these 3 agencies, there were several reasons that I ranked them up in the top, anywhere from their experience within the Northwest, their experience with local governments and recruiting for agencies that are similar in size to Stayton. I think it's really important that they understand the smaller community. And I also, it was really important that they explain to us what their timeline is, what that's going to look like for us, how they're going to guide us through this recruitment process. And additionally, I also was real interested in how they did their candidate screening. And for the most part, and this was with all of the agencies, they will do a majority of the upfront screening for us, and a lot of it is handled by them. So what I'm looking for from the council is guidance on what the next steps that you would like to take are. We've got some options. It's up to you, the direction that we go with this. If you would like me to schedule presentations from each of the agencies, or if there's one, if you guys want to make a decision on an agency this evening.
Mr. Mayor?
I think so. Go ahead. Yeah, please.
First off, this is really awesome. I love that I'm able to see the thought process that went into this. It makes me feel really comfortable knowing that it was that in-depth. And I'm not surprised that it was. You always do a great job. But anyway, is there one of these that just really stood out to you that you just felt like they would be perfect for Stayton? I know that I have, from what you presented, I have my idea of what that is, but is there one that like you were like, I really like this one over the other 2?
For me, I also did reach out and do some reference checks and talk to other cities, and I talked to not only the candidates who worked with the recruitment agency, but I talked to the other side, the mayor or city staff there. And for me, the people that stood out the most and that I heard back from were Peckham and McKinney. And they really, what the candidates had to say was the communication on their end was really great. They really explained the process, set the dates right up front. So when you have a candidate that applies, like we've already set dates. Here are the dates. If you're chosen to move on, these are the dates that we're going to be doing interviews. And then on the staff side and the council side, it seemed that there was just a lot of back and forth communication. If candidates had questions, they were not just waiting, they brought it right forward if they didn't know the answer, and they would ask staff or the council. And there's also up front, and with all the agencies you have this, they're going to come in and they're going to talk to staff, they're going to talk to the council, they're going to talk to stakeholders. It's an involved process, and really kind of help us figure out what it is that we're looking for. So they were one, and Prothman, they stood out. They made it into my top 3 because of their experience in the Northwest. And the Novak Consulting Group, one thing that really stood out to me was that they set the 1-year goals with the new city manager. After we do the hiring, they actually come in and help set the first-year goals so that new city manager has kind of the layout of what they need to aim for that first year, which that was one thing that stood out to me. They didn't have the Northwest experience, but they had some other interesting things, so.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
I did notice with the Novak Consulting Group, they kind of had like a timetable in the very back on the attachment A that did lay out the process and what time would be required for that. I thought I heard you mention something about Peckham and McKinney also providing that to you, and I didn't see it in here, but they did provide it to you.
Yeah, in conversations and just the feedback that I'd heard. They in here, they didn't, I think that they have kind of I'd have to look again not off the top of my head, but it seemed like they had a loose schedule of like, here's how we're going to do it.
Okay.
And then from the feedback that I had gotten from other, from references from other communities, it was that was a huge thing.
Do they feel that they can adequately find a city manager in the time prescribed?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Alyssa, I think this is just me being picky, but do you see any problem with a group that focuses mostly on recruiting Northwest managers rather than California, Arizona? And my thinking here is, may not make a lot of sense, but the idea that these folks network all the time. And we would be going out into this with all of our warts exposed, because these folks talk to each other.
I think it was important that one of the things that we're looking for is not just a search in the Northwest.
Okay.
What I was looking for was someone who's going to go nationwide and really tap into the resources that they have and explore all. And not just, we're going to post these advertisements. They're actually going to go out looking for the people who maybe aren't even looking for a position right now.
All right, super. So what would you folks like to do with this?
I feel like, I don't know, can you discuss it before we make motions?
We can,
yeah.
We can put it off for a couple of weeks too.
No, I feel like a really good job was done on this, and since she was in the weeds with this much more than our small window here, I know which one I liked, and it happened to be the one that was the top of hers anyway. I guess my only question is, with that 1 year goals, is there any way we can do like an a la carte thing? Like, can we like throw that 1 year goal?
I definitely can ask.
In there?
I can always ask, but I can't guarantee.
Cool. Yeah, it is cool. So I feel comfortable making a decision tonight if we don't have to see presentations, because presentations just sound like they're going to cost more money, more time, more city staff time, and if everyone else is comfortable, I'm comfortable.
Well, one thing we're going to have next week is an executive session and talk about lots of things, mostly about city managers and recruiting and job status and what we think we want. So if that helps, I'd just suggest we delay making a decision here tonight until July 1st and then move ahead. But that's just me.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Alyssa, when you're speaking to these folks, they said to start earlier than later, correct? As far as the recruitment process goes.
What was that, when they can start?
No, they would encourage us to start sooner on
Yes,
on the
absolutely.
seeking out the candidate
Yes.
other than later.
Okay.
And I think you've done a great job. Obviously, you've done a great job here securing your top three. And I agree with Councilor Hook. I think all the work's here. I guess the only thing I would say is the cost is pretty much similar with all three, it looks like.
Yes, yeah, the cost on all of them was pretty similar, and the only thing, and we've got plenty in the budget with the $35,000. So what's included is their fees, and then outside of that, there's travel and everything for the candidates that we do bring here, and travel, airfare, or all that stuff, so.
Okay, so,
So I had a question, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
How much does the budget for that typically run for those other expenditures outside of their flat 26,000? I think was Peckham and McKinney's.
Yeah, so it's just going to depend how many we bring in. And there's options. There's some entities that do like a per diem, like no matter where you're coming from, here's an amount of money that you'll get for travel. Figure it out, or we get receipts and we reimburse.
So it likely would not exceed the 35,000.
No, I wouldn't expect it to. Mhm.
Good.
And we'll have a chance to screen those folks prior to giving them a commitment to fly out here or whatever.
Yes, yes,
So the Skype,
absolutely.
I think we did it last time, the Skype was pretty revealing, eliminated some folks.
And that's actually what the recruitment agency handles, all of that. They're going to do a bunch of pre-screening, and then they come in with a notebook for each of the council members. Here's 10, for instance, of our top candidates. Who do you want to bring? And here's why they think they're the best fit for, so.
you folks want to pick somebody tonight?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like
Yes.
to make a motion. I motion that we go ahead and direct staff to award the executive recruitment to Peckham and McKinney, who submitted a proposal, and I'd also like to direct staff to enter into a contract with the agency.
Okay, now,
Can we do that now?
Is that?
Yeah.
Okay, Peckham and McKinney. Okay, is there a second?
I second.
Okay, a motion to award an executive recruiting contract to Peckham and McKinney. I guess that's it, yeah. Any questions or discussion?
I just want to thank Alyssa again,
Yeah.
making this extremely easy
Very
to
good.
make a decision. I
Very good.
feel like this has been the easiest decision since I became a counselor.
Any more discussion?
Just thank you, Alyssa, for your hard work. I appreciate the attention to detail.
Allocates to Alyssa, thank you. Let's go ahead and vote on this then. All in favor of awarding that recruiting contract to Peckham and
We don't have
McKinney,
to vote
please
on
say
it?
aye.
No, you do.
What do we have to do? What are we missing?
Sorry, we were getting someone from the audience that wanted to speak. So
Somebody
I
wants to speak? Steve?
saying, we're in the middle of a motion, though, Mayor.
Well, yeah.
There's
So-
a comment somewhere, I'm not sure where that
At the end.
fits.
Well, there was a citizen comment section and I missed it, so it's on me. Can I go back?
We have a motion on the table.
I can withdraw, or you can withdraw the
You
motion.
gotta yell sooner, Steve.
Mr. Mayor, I'll go ahead and withdraw
I
my
missed it.
motion for the time being to permit. Mr.
I'll
Prezant.
withdraw my second for the time being.
Okay, we're back to sort of square one. Citizen comment. Steve, thank you.
My question, not knowing this process, is there public input in this process? And are there differences between the agencies on how they do that?
They all pretty much have the same view on that, and it's really going to be up to the council. They'll come in and talk with the council and get an idea of what they want. Usually with these sorts of recruitments, they do, one example would be they'll do like an open house where the public can come and meet the
A
candidates.
meet and greet, yeah.
Yeah, a meet and greet.
Okay.
And does the council have the option to then get feedback from those that attend the meet and greet?
I believe that is part of it,
Okay.
yes.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you, Steve. I'm sorry, I messed up there. Okay, now, let's go back. Any other comments? No. Richard? No?
All right. Mr. Mayor, once again, I will motion to award the recruitment of a new city manager to Peckham and McKinney Executive Search and direct staff to enter into an agreement with the agency.
Okay. A
I
motion-
second.
A motion to award a recruiting contract to Peckham and McKinney headhunters. And is there a second?
I second.
Okay. And go ahead and poll the council on this one.
Sure.
Unless there's any more discussion, which we just did. Go ahead, please.
Counselor Patty?
Yes.
Counselor Ort?
Yes.
Counselor Hook?
Yes.
Counselor Quigley?
Yes.
Motion
Okay,
passes 4-0.
good, got that one done. Good. Communications from mayor and councilors. Anyone tonight? I've got a quick one I want Lance to touch on. Ordinance 922, if he would, when we get done with the next one. But do anyone have anything they need to share from various things they've done? I don't have anything. Lance, as we finish up tonight, please, 922, that's what all the hand signals were for.
Oh, is that what that was? We were trying to figure that out.
We thought you were entering a bet into the pool as to what time the meeting would end.
No, we need to get a development.
Jana here was betting on 10 o'clock.
I want to get in a development.
No faith.
I need to throw her under.
I need to get a development agreement with Hayden Homes, and this.
Well, I'd be remiss. I spoke to Keith about this last week, and unfortunately, we didn't have time to put together a revised 922.
Okay.
I spoke with Andy Parks regarding this issue. We came to the same conclusion. It was discovered last week that Resolution 922 was passed in 2014, which kind of similar to what Susie was talking about tonight about establishing SDC rates for our city. Because of the growth rate that was applied to the 2006 master plan, we established a bunch of projects that established the SDC fees. That was based on a growth rate of 3.4% or something similar to that. In 2014, staff realized that we weren't going to approach that growth rate, and it was going to be closer to 0.8 or 1%. So in doing so, they went and revised the list for the SDCs for that methodology to calculate what we should be charging our SDCs. When they did that, they eliminated some projects that, well, one in particular that goes across the Lambert property, which was on the original, in the original master plan. Unfortunately, that line is, we requested Hayden Homes to construct that as part of their subdivision. I was always under the impression that we would be paying for the upsizing of that line from an 8-inch to a 10-inch. And that's normally, that's what SDCs are for. Finding that that project had been completely eliminated from the list, I can't use any SDC funds for that. So what I would like to do is go in and revise that list. Resolution 922 allows me to do that and bring it back before council. I would like to put that line back on the list. There's a lot of reasons for that. Why it was taken off, I don't know. It's so close to Shaft Road, and that line is, you know, very dependent on development to occur on that property. And that's what Hayden Home's going to do. They're going to build 51 lots. They're going to pay for 3/4 of that line to be constructed, which benefits the city of Stayton. Don't know why it was ever removed. It was so close to Shaft Road, but it was.
Can we get this done by the 1st of July? Meeting?
I believe so, because what I'm going to do is look at taking off some light projects, light costing projects. We have a project like upgrading the Public Works building for like $250,000. That's not going to happen in the next 6 to 8 years. So I would take that off, replace it with this project, very similar in size, scope, as far as costing, and then take that revision of 922 back to you folks to debate and approve. This only helps the city of Stayton. And we'll be looking at other projects that I think that might be put off into the future, 10 to 15 years, maybe less, but certainly not in the next 6 to 8 years. And within that 6 to 8 years, we'll probably have another water master plan prepared. And all these projects will be looked at then to determine whether or not they're actually going to take place in the next 20 years.
So can we get this 10-inch line on the agenda for
Well,
922?
why I'm bringing this to you tonight is because I have a development agreement that I'm getting ready to sign.
I hope so. Please do.
And I would like to be able to tell Hayden Homes, go build this line, we're going to pay for the upsizing.
Okay. All right.
And that is why I wanted to bring that to you guys tonight, so you guys could say, yeah, go forward, or no, hold off.
Yes, go forward.
I can't, well, it's something you guys need to discuss.
So you just need like a head nod from us type thing at
Yeah,
this point?
I really just want you guys to be aware of this is coming. And if you have any objections, voice them now, and I will pull it out of the development agreement, and we don't have the money to pay for it if we don't use SDCs. It's simple as that, so we won't build it.
I think it makes sense.
There is no objection from this group.
Yeah. I don't have any.
As of, I will try to get this back to the revised 922 by the first meeting of July. If not, it will be the second, but it will be in July.
Okay.
Is there a devil's advocate argument against this? I mean, honestly?
No, I mean, I don't know the reason why it was taken off. There's some projects on there that I don't see are going to happen in the next 10 to 12, 14 years. That, you know, but the person that was doing it at the time had their reasons, and I don't know what those are, but it just happened.
If you came here ready to sell it and you didn't have to sell it, you were already on board.
I told Keith I would.
Okay.
Thanks, Lance.
Thank you.
If that's done, thank you, Lance. If public hearing on mobile food units next time on July 1st, 485 West Ida Street appeal, I think that's the sidewalks. That's on. And if there's nothing else, let's go home. Thank you, folks.